So aloha and welcome to the 2025 Hawaiʻi Library Association Conference. My name is Karina Chernisky, and I am going to be facilitating this session. We are so honored to have with us this morning Hinano Tangaro, Stasha, Gardasevic, and Don Sueoka present Mapping the Archival Landscape, Insights from the Survey of Historical Records Repositories in Hawaii. All of their bios are on the conference website, so please take a look if you are unfamiliar with them. But they are all from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, working in the Hamilton Library. This recording will be available to all conference attendees after the conference is finished. You will not be in the recording, and you are also all muted. Please type your questions in the chat. And with that, I am going to turn you over to Stasha.
Mahalo, Karina. Thank you so much for introducing us, and welcome everybody to our presentation where we will share more about the insights from the survey of historical records repositories in Hawaii that has resulted in the updated version of the directory maintained by the Association of Hawaii Archivists that we are all very close to, and Hinano is the current president of AHA. So we will start the presentation with a little intro for few of you that might not know what AHA is. And it was founded in 1989, and today it gathers around 80 archivists, librarians, history lovers, and everybody who is interested in the local history and the repositories. And from the last year, we are a nonprofit organization with the mission to support and provide continuing education for the state's archivists and to ensure preservation of and access to a wide variety of historical materials in archival repositories of Hawaii. So one of the AHA's function is to update this directory of historical records, although this tradition started in 1982, initially by Hawaiian Historical Society and Hawaii State Historical Records Advisory Board. But AHA has been updating the directory, and the current edition was published in the early 2025, and we are now in the 7th edition. And the current directory has information on 57 repositories, and we collected the information in two ways, one through survey, and the other way was by copying data from the previous version of the directory for those who didn't populate the survey. So this is a little background on how this directory has evolved throughout the years, and the number of institutions and repositories that were represented has grown throughout the years, although it has declined for the last edition. And this is the similar data just broken by the islands that shows that Oahu's number of repository has drastically increased, and unfortunately most likely due to the devastating fires in 2023, the number of the repositories in Maui has decreased. So how did it come to the update of that directory? So we have had an ad hoc committee in AHA, and all of these ladies have contributed a lot to creating this survey that in this version went beyond just collecting the information that will be published. We wanted to learn more about how these institutions operate, which software they use, what are their challenges, where do they need more training, and other questions that we will reflect today upon. So we did collect data for quite a while and started that in November 2024. And the last entry was added to the survey in July 2025. In some cases, we went directly to ask for the answers, and others people just did it. And we are still collecting entries for the directory because people would find out about it and write to us saying, oh, we want to be included. So it's updatable. And the number of responses to the survey that this committee has created and distributed was 56. We removed 2 duplicates and 1 non-repository and consolidated all University of Hawaii at Manoa Library units into one, which brought us to a total of 50 answers that we analyzed upon data normalization. So I will show you some general trends, and then my colleagues will take over to go into details. So first of all, as I said, most of the repositories are in Oahu, and that's 32, followed by island of Hawaii or Big Island, 7 repositories. Kauai has 6, and then other Molokai has 2, and then 1 is all over the islands, and 1 is in Maui. So another general trend is showing the number of institutions by type of institution, and we reused the typology from a different source. And this was very interesting for me in particular, because to see that most of the repositories here are from museums or museum and historical society or historical association, so 13. So there is a big overlap, and which tells us that AHA should definitely work more with the Hawaii Museum Association, because it's museums do have archives, and archives are our main public, but they are part of the museum. So the next category is institutional archives, followed by historical society or historical site, followed by academic library, and the same number is of church archives, followed by 5 school libraries and archives, and then there are 3 government archives and 2 native community archives. This next slide shows the answer. We asked, please use 5 keywords to describe holdings of your archives. So we did a little thematic analysis to discover 9 themes that could be applied over these 50 repositories. So this is also an interesting way to see and to really address this topic of Laulima, where do we meet? So some of these topics, I'm going to list them, are plantation era labor and immigration, then church and missionary history, then Hawaiian kingdom, monarchy and legal history, then education and institutional history, military history, native Hawaiian culture and history, place-based and community history, government politics and social services, and natural resources, science and environment. So this could be a good starting point to envision where do we overlap and where can we meet. And some of the general trends that pertain to the user communities, one of the question was, and this is the multiple choice question, there's so many answers. We wanted to see who is the public that you address. And the most prominent are personal researchers and scholars. And then 33 answers are for educators, followed by school-related research and genealogical research. And then less for cultural practitioners. And then there are a few answers that are related to media-related inquiries, church members, filmmakers, urban developers, authors or publishers, and then coordinators for local festivals and community events. I will now invite Dawn to tell us more about the collaboration and findings and opportunities.
Mahalo, Stasha. I'm Dawn Sueoka. I'm the Congressional Papers Archivist at the University of Hawaii at Manoa Library. And I'm going to be kind of looking at the survey data with opportunities for collaboration in mind, really kind of digging into this theme of laulima. And essentially what we wanted to do in this section was ask, what does this data show us, and what opportunities does it present? So the first kind of area that we're going to look at is software use by repositories. And this chart shows the answers to questions 11 and 12 on the survey, which asked repositories what software they use for processing and for digital archives. The responses are color-coded by island so that you can see at a glance which tools have been adopted across multiple islands. And we can see on this first chart that there's actually kind of a lot of tools that are being used by only a single repository, such as Atom, Axial, and pertinent.org. In this next chart, we eliminated all of the software programs that were being used only by one repository. And this one focuses on tools that were used by 2 or more repositories. And here we can start to see a handful of tools kind of jumping out as being pretty widely used across Hawaii. One is the Google Suite of tools. Another one is Past Perfect, which is used across 5 different islands. And to a lesser extent, we also see pretty wide adoption of Omeka in both of its flavors, Omeka Classic and Omeka S, and also of Archive Space. All right, so based on these findings, we can see a number of potential opportunities for collaboration emerging. First of all, there's potential for statewide knowledge sharing around tools that are used by multiple repositories, especially Past Perfect, but also Omeka and Archive Space. This might look like small user groups within AHA. It could mean multiple repositories sharing the costs of training, for example, exchanging workflows, documents, jointly hosting training workshops, or even bringing trainers to Hawaii. For hosted software, there's also potential for negotiating consortial agreements with vendors to reduce hosting or other support costs for smaller institutions. And the number of programs that are used across institutions also sort of indicates that data housed within these common systems is already structured in a way that lends itself to sharing. In other words, if all the repositories using Past Perfect, for example, wanted to develop a way for researchers to search across their collections, I think the amount of data crosswalking and standardization required to make that possible would be significantly reduced. And we'll get into the possibilities of data sharing a little bit later. Okay, the next area that we're going to look at is digitization. Specifically now, we're looking at the responses to question 20. Are you conducting digitization of the archival holdings? And before kind of getting into this data, I want to kind of preface it by saying that we're really looking at digitization here as something that's value neutral. So digitizing collections is not inherently good, and not digitizing them is not inherently bad. We know there are many good reasons to not digitize and share collections. So this first chart shows the responses to this question broken down by island. And we can see that even though the number of neighbor island repositories is small, they are all very actively digitizing. We also wanted to take a look at responses broken down by repository type. So this chart kind of indicates that repository types across the board are working on digitization, with church archives, institutional archives, and native and community archives being the most active, with 100% of those repository types digitizing. University and archives and museums were also pretty well represented. The repository types who were least actively digitizing were historical societies / sites and school libraries and archives. And then the final chart in this subsection looks at how people are doing digitization, whether they're doing it in-house, whether they're outsourcing it, or doing a combination of the two. And of the digitization that's happening, a very, very large majority is doing that work in-house. Okay, so what are some of the collaboration opportunities that these findings present? Since over 90% of Hawaiʻi repositories are doing some kind of in-house digitization, there's potential for greater knowledge sharing on in-house digitization workflows and equipment, which we already see happening on the AHA listserv with questions about Epson scanners and such. There are opportunities for joint training and even joint scanning days for staff, volunteers, and interns, particularly if repositories are using the same equipment and software. And then for historical sites and school libraries, which were the category of repositories that were doing the least amount of digitization, if they do indeed want to do more, there's opportunities for AHA or other repositories to provide greater support to them. Okay. And then the final kind of area we want to focus on in this section is access. Specifically now we're looking at responses to question 10. If you have a public-facing digital archive / collections, please add the link here. So everybody who dropped a link is in blue, registered as yes, and then everybody who kind of left that question blank was recorded as a no. Like with digitization, having a public-facing digital archives is not inherently good, and the reverse is not inherently bad. So in this first chart, you see how people answer the question broken down by island, and we can see that Oahu collections are the most accessible online. Okay, in this next chart, we're looking at answers to the same question, but broken down by repository type. And this was interesting because I feel like it kind of obliquely enables us to get at the question of resourcing. I think a lot of times university archives, government archives, and institutional archives can have greater access to funding and IT support. And this chart sort of bears that out with those types of repositories able to share their collections online more. And I think it's kind of interesting to compare this slide to the slide a couple ones back that was asking of the repository types, are you digitizing or not digitizing? Because what it shows is that way more people are digitizing than are putting their collections online. And I think it would be worth it if AHA is interested to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Because I think if one of the reasons that people aren't sharing their collections online is lack of funding or expertise to kind of stand up and run some kind of content management system, then there is an opportunity for us to kind of think about how can we collaborate to make this happen for each other. Okay. Now we're going to look at some access opportunities, and I'll turn it over to Stasha to share a little bit more about some of the projects she's working on.
Thank you. So first of all, just to tag on the previous slide, the project that I'm interested in exploring further, that we proposed, Helen Wong Smith and I, we proposed and got funded for $10,000 from DPLA, is a community discussion where we would like to talk to the community of archivists, but also other institutions, as we see that we are pretty much the same crowd that in HLA, in AHA, in HMA, to see where can we get together around digitization projects. So and also create kind of like an excellence network, collaboration network, and think about creating a central repository where we can all contribute to make it a one-stop shop for exploring digital history. We have few of similar aggregator institutions such as Papakilo or University of Hawaii. Manoa Library is also hosting several collections. So except for hosting, we would like to explore which of these institutions could be a good central base where others can contribute their metadata. So it doesn't have to be holding the files, just pointing to back to their repositories online, but also creating a infrastructure where those who don't have capacity to hold and host their own collections, so that institution can host it for them to provide this platform for publishing as well as aggregating the metadata from other institutions. So this project will bring people to talk about this as a possibility, and hopefully we will invite AHA and HLA and HMA to support it, so we can maybe do it even if when that project ends to do it later on. One of the other things that this project will look at is whether the institutions here would like to contribute their metadata to DPLA. Should we establish a hub? Because DPLA usually accepts metadata under CC0 license, and preliminary talks with the local institutions have shown that they're not interested in sharing their metadata under CC0. So we would like to, DPLA would like to see what are the terms of collaboration for local institutions. And Don will introduce a very related project that goes a level above. So Don, you can take it over.
Yeah, and so what Stasha was sharing was kind of focused on like item level records for digitized items within archival repositories. I've been working with Keahiahi Long and Ellen Ray Cachola on a NEH funded project to explore building a culturally and socially informed finding aid aggregator for Hawaii archival repositories, something like the Online Archive of California. So this is a 2-year project, and a big part of it is going to be holding talk story sessions with both archival workers and researchers on all the different islands. And the outcome of this project is going to be to produce a technical report that outlines functional requirements for what an aggregator for Hawaiian materials would need, and also kind of a metadata dictionary, standards manual, and some proposed models for ongoing sustainability and support, because we know from other finding aid aggregator projects that that's a really big challenge. So we are going to be hosting an informational project launch Zoom meeting next week. It's going to be Wednesday, November 19th at 3 p.m. So if you're interested, please email me and I'll send you the registration link. I'll put my email in the chat. So thanks.
Aloha. Aloha kako. My name is Hinano Tangaro, and I am the president of the Association of Hawaii Archivists and also the Olelawa'i Metadata Librarian at Hamilton Library. So to begin this component of the presentation, we're going to look at what members identified as their top training and education needs. Next slide, please. So the 3 most common areas are first, preservation and conservation. About 60% of respondents emphasized the physical care of collections. That includes proper enclosures, storage, handling, and environmental monitoring. Next is digital records management at 53%. This covers ingest, description, storage, and long-term preservation of electronic materials. And third, digitization at 36%. This reflects how closely members connect preservation to access. They see digitization as a bridge between safeguarding materials and making them usable to their communities. So together, these three areas show that our members are balancing both traditional archival skills and modern digital competencies, a hybrid model of care that defines the current state of our profession. Next slide. Thank you. When we look at institutional needs, three themes stand out. First, balancing preservation and digital access. Institutions are trying to manage growing digital collections while still protecting physical materials. Second, collection preparedness in this case of a natural disaster, and how digital records management can support continuity and recovery. And third, value-driven practices, including sustainability, indigenous protocols, and equity. Institutions want to align their work with ethical and cultural values, not just technical standards. So while the need sounds practical, they actually reflect a deeper shift, one towards value-based archival practices. Next slide. Our survey also points to several areas of opportunity where we can strengthen capacity together. I'm leaning on the theme that Stasha pointed out earlier about Laulima. So collaborative training. Members are looking for ways to balance care of physical and digital collections through shared training models. Defining what a shared training model is and what that looks like is the opportunity that I hope we can attain. Next is cross-institutional collaboration. Many of these same needs are shared across libraries, museums, archives, schools, and community organizations. There's real potential for partnership there. And lastly, on community-centered approaches. Members express interest in cultural responsive practices, training that recognizes Hawaiian and Indigenous protocols and ways of knowing. These opportunities remind us that learning doesn't have to happen in isolation. It can happen collectively across institutions and in community spaces. Next slide. Continuing with areas of opportunity, the data also shows pathways for building resilience and sustainability. Access and engagement tools, mentorship, peer-led workshops, and community-driven initiatives can help archivists share skills and their experiences. Building resilience through statewide disaster preparedness training that supports institutions across all islands. And finally, funding and resource literacy, especially grant writing and advocacy skills. This ranked high in the survey and speaks to a real need to sustain archives long-term. So although there are technical opportunities for growth and professional development, results of this survey clearly identified the need for relationship building, resource sharing, and collective growth. Next slide. Finally, our data suggests there are some gaps between institutional priorities and what individual professionals are asking for. For example, there's often tension between infrastructure and sustainability. Institutions focus on building systems, but professionals are asking for support to maintain them over time. Second, disaster planning is another gap. Many institutions recognize the need, but haven't built consistent plans or training to support staff. And access and engagement. Professionals see public access and community involvement as essential, while institutions may prioritize compliance and control. Next slide. So our survey didn't ask directly how members receive training, but the results suggest that current opportunities are uneven. High demand for grant writing and disaster preparedness training points to gaps, particularly on the neighbor islands. So the opportunity doesn't just create new trainings, but to evaluate how they're delivered and whether they're meeting diverse institutional and community needs. Next slide, please. So next steps for AHA. First, we need to establish a strong educational committee to sustain and build on the momentum reflected in these results. Again, we need to rely on peer support and collective sharing and initiatives. And there's something that we hope to build up. So we are now actively recruiting both chair and members for the education committee for AHA. And also with a fresh and more interactive website, we plan to make better use of that platform for member communication and for information sharing. And lastly, we continue to be involved with the discussions to support our community while improving access to archival materials. So in summary, our members' responses showed a field in transition, balancing the care of collections with digital innovation and grounding technical work in community values. The needs are clear, but so is the energy and vision to meet them together. Last slide. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, to that,
You've
we
been
would
invited.
like to invite all of you here who are passionate about this idea of moving this forward to join the AHA Education Committee. Another AHA committees to help us go to the next step. And we would like to open for questions. And I see there was a lot of discussion and comments and questions between Dr. Drew and Sophia. So I'm gonna first invite if somebody would like to comment rather than me reading. Wink, wink, Dr. Drew, if you want to say something.
Yeah,
feel
thank
free
you.
to.
So I just want to say a few things. That was a great panel, and really appreciate all of your sharing your insights onto that, and also the thanks for the hard work of actually compiling the directory. And that's something that we all use in the profession so much. So mahalo really for going that extra mile. And I shared in the comment that I tried to do, it's really interesting when you look at the data and focus on the number of repositories, you're going to come out with one set of information. I tried to do a similar work using the repository partly in terms of thinking about the places and focusing on the number of professionals. In other words, people with the LIS degree focusing on archives or archives and public history. And I think you're going to come up with a very different set of data when you do that, because, and I think that part of that relates to the question that you're thinking about down the road, which is the education committees, that are you doing trainings or education? Because like, if I don't have an LIS, an archive degree, and someone says, I want to digitize this, and they say, I want a workshop, they might imagine it's something that you can do in one day, and then you go home and, it's you download the thing and do it instantly. Whereas people, all of you who've done the degree realize that there's so many different parts, and coming up with culturally specific metadata, working with communities, and that it really is a time intensive kind of thing. And I think that by focusing on professionals rather than just all repositories, because again, you saw like a huge number on neighbor islands that are museums. Many of those are places, unfortunately, they don't hire professional. And I think that part of our advocacy shouldn't be only, especially Dawn's part, when you're talking about the possibility of collaboration between them. I mean, that's great. Where, if they're using Omeka or, the same thing, let's work together. And there's a lot of opportunity for partnering. But on the other hand, I think part of our job as archivists should be to educate these professionals why they need an archivist, even if it's part-time, because they will bring up these things of metadata and sharing, which your studies show that many of them aren't doing. And so I think just part of our role is that it would be impossible for us to try to educate someone to be an archivist without their through a small number of workshops. And this is something that it's not just here in Hawaii, but the archival, as you know, the archival field in general has really struggled with, since there used to be so many who were unpaid volunteers who are trying to do this and not using any standards. And, in that worked to some extent before digital, but, it's certainly much more complicated now. So anyway, I don't want to monopolize this, but I just wanted to kind of really try to share that's, I think, that emphasis of looking at professionals or how much do we want to train the entire community is a big thing to consider. Again, mahalo nui loa.
Thank you, Dr. Leroux. It is a big task and big ask, and it's a good point to advocate the need for trained people. In some institutions, I believe that in the smaller institutions, it's mainly the leadership that needs to be interested in the first place in the long-term preservation, digitization, and then that brings to the next step who will hire that knows how to do that. And especially in the light that archival path seems to be really of interest for the LIS students here. So that's a really good point. Sophia,
And,
yes,
oh,
please.
Before that,
sorry,
could I
Dawn.
just add one thing? Is
Yeah.
that I think I appreciate your comments, Andrew, and I think that we can do both support our communities and smaller institutions that may not have an archivist, and advocate and educate about the value of archivists by specifically by sharing our knowledge and resources as an organization, as AHA, made up of, many trained professionals and many people who come to this profession through other paths. And I think through sharing knowledge, we can advocate for the value of archives and archivists. So mahalo. And sorry, Sophia, please go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on a similar train, and I think this relates to an experience I had where I was hired to do processing for the Department of Philosophy, processing some of their historical materials. And like the main reason why they hired me is because like in the interview, I started asking them questions that were all based on my prior experiences, being like a student worker in the special collections at another university. And they were like, "Oh, I didn't even know you had to ask those questions." I was like, "Okay, what are you housing these materials in? Where are you going to store them? What type of catalog, what type of access are you going to give?" And I think something I've had a pretty strong question about is just how do we inform people more that our profession exists and what our profession does? And I know you kind of already talked about with that about doing education in terms of like educating people about what we do. But I think even before that, there's been so many times where I, as a LIS student, have told someone what I'm majoring in, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't even know you could major in that." There's always like an assumption that people who work in archives get like a degree in history or get a degree in something that's not actually kind of related to the professional aspect of libraries and archives. So yeah, I was just kind of wondering if anyone had any experiences around that of like not just like educating people on how to do archival work, but just educating people that an archival profession exists and that like there is, I don't know, like there is things like an LIS degree and there is things like archives and professionals in archives that can like assist you and provide help and support, especially if you're trying to do a community archival project, like where's people you can reach out to and ask questions to.
Does anybody want to answer to this? What I can say about it is, as I'm involved in HLA, I think HLA is doing better job in advocacy for profession and profession related issues than AHAIs. But I don't. I think we should do better, but I have no good idea on how Hinano does.
Yeah, no, I don't know how to directly answer that question, but I can say that archives are not public, like libraries. So there's, how do I say this? Not all archives will let you go in and see what they have. And especially if they're like a private collection, or it's harder to get access to them. For a lot of reasons that are systemic and even in Hawaii that are colonial even. that the tape and the gates are, the locks are stronger there for some places, not all. But going back to advocating, your first point that you talked about, how do we let people know that we exist and that our profession is here? With my experience, which isn't a lot of experience, but it all comes down to funding. And if the in my experience, it all came down to funding and whether if they felt like there was a need for them to have a full-time archivist. A lot of them depend on a lot of them depend on grants, and grants has been taken away, so that will kind of lessen the jobs now in the field. And then even having them hire people on full-time, at if they're not usually museums, cultural heritage, churches, those places depend on grant funding to sustain position like ours. And then for people at the state level and the federal level, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you're right. There should be more advocacy happening at a higher level than what we can at places who actually have power and authority to control those decisions. But as far as like HLA and AHA is involved, we're not we're not public like HLA. HLA, they're a lot of their collections are public, so I don't know how that goes either.
And I'll just add, I saw that Dr. Wertheimer mentioned in the chat the state archives, and it's kind of positioning of itself as the public archives of Hawaii. And I would say Adam at the state archives does a really good job of making the work of archivists visible. He's on like Hawaii News Now, talking about collections that he's caring for. He's in like Hanaho magazine. And so in terms of making our work visible to just like regular people, I think there's a lot of potential for just simply like, media exposure. And that's something, the kind of outreach that he does, I really do feel that it benefits all of us within the profession. And oh, I see, Andrew, you've raised your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to add to that, we're here in Hawaii, because we're such a centralized state in many ways. I understand part of that is colonial legacy and things that we can try to deal with. But I think that there's a possibility that the state really, in other states, we've seen that they were able to get funds and distribute funds for different projects for digitization. And in places like California, the reason the Online Archive of California is so awesome is that they provided grants to different agencies. And then they said, you can do that, but you have to use our standards. And you also have to make sure that your things are public if you want to be part of this. Now, something like Hula Preservation Society might be able to say, well, you can determine what is culturally specific that could be, facing to the public. But I hope that AHA, instead of would really try to partner with the state archives on the kind of operation that you're trying to do, because I don't think that, I know AHA is now 501c3, but or C4, but in any case, the possibility of getting funds is much less than what the idea of the state archives might be able to do, and that really could help these community archives, especially on the neighbor islands, and also try to think about like what things should be preserved, what things should be digitized, and again, ideally part of a wider community discussion. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Aisha, you also have a question? Oh, now you're muted.
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to make a small comment. On Molokai, we have a website called Molokai.com. I'll put it in the chat, okay? And this is Moaʻe Molokai Digital Repository. So all the librarians on Molokai gathered all our archival stuff that wasn't protected properly. And so we have an actual archivist that graduated last year, and she's part of our Molokai Library Services cadre. And they created this, yes, Pulama and Melia. And it's been so wonderful having this archive repository because it connected our people on Molokai to way back to where it says what 18, like all the way back to from 1850. So yearbooks, newspapers, all kind of old stuff that we don't ever think that would actually have, but it has our community connected to our ancestors and looking for connecting our family trees. Like it's been really helpful to have these archives. And so I believe that there should be more advocacy for librarians doing archival stuff. And it's been helpful for our island Molokai, but you guys are more than welcome to go check it out. It's called moaemolokai.com. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We follow that project closely. And just as a final thought, we are over the time now, but there was another question that is about sustainability, and Dr. Dew touched that in the collaboration with the state archives. We will explore, there are different models. And the question was, what if funding ceases? What's going to happen with this potential portal? Or who's hosting metadata. So that is a really good question that we will explore in the future. And hopefully we will have one of the institutions that have infrastructure to host it, such as state library and university or whoever the community trusts with their data. So that's a question where they would like to contribute and where they would not. So thank you all for your comments and for the discussion and for being at our presentation.
Thank you so much, Stasha, Dawn, and Hinano. Let's give a big round of applause to our presenters. I did want to mention that I left a comment in the chat. So if you would take a few minutes, it doesn't have to be today, it can be tomorrow or in a couple of days, but to go to their session link and to provide some feedback so that they can understand what you took away from this session. That would be especially helpful. But thank you all so much. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.
Mahalo.